Welcome. This is a video overview to review the materials for sessions 4 and 5 of the Coping with Blues program. So this is a behavioral activation program that is pulling from materials from the Oxford University Press, Treating Later Life Depression. So in our time today for this video, I'm going to be outlining the shared components of session 4 and 5, which involves repeated material. I'll be walking through the specific learn and practice forms from the Treating Later Life Depression workbook that'll be a part of this program, and then offering some reminders for session pacing and some troubleshooting tips, and also pointing out where in the Treating Later Life Depression clinician guide you can go for additional tips and information. And so just a reminder that sessions 4 and 5 are held after the resident has participated in session 3 for session 4, and then session 5 is held after someone's participated in session 4. As I've indicated in the earlier overview videos, we'd like to encourage you to keep moving forward even if there's been a delay or a pause between previous sessions in this one. Someone has been away on vacation or in the hospital or had some other life circumstance that's created significant delay. And, even if someone is less active in doing the between sessions work and practice, we'd like to encourage the moving forward. And the reason for that is that we are intentionally repeating some information, an opportunity for a little bit of a catch up and a review along the way. And as I indicated, sessions 4 and 5 use the exact identical content. And that is very intentional. We have found in our work with clients, as well as in working with other clinicians, that it typically takes a number of times of repetition for these basic components for behavioral activation to sort of click and sink in. So don't be alarmed at all if after session 4 you get into session 5 and it kind of feels like you're talking about material that should sound familiar to them, but it feels like it's a first conversation. So we're repeating, and it takes a while for this to sink in. So, some of the tips that we have for you in the clinician's packet for this Coping with Blues program is mentioned that by session 4 and in session 5, you're mentioning that we're about halfway through in our time, assuming the 8-session format, and that can oftentimes help residents orient themselves to the program, and sometimes that can help with a little bit stronger commitment to engage in the process. We'd like to encourage you to spend no more than 10 to 15 minutes discussing the practice forms from the previous session. And again, you're providing the resident with a single stapled packet for sessions 4 and 5 for them to put in the folder for the program. As always, as you're working in person with residents, you're helping them write down something on the practice forms while you are there to get started, and to also be clear that they're expected to work on these between sessions, and that in the next session, you're really looking forward to seeing what they've been learning and what they've been writing down, and that the two of you will be looking at that newly written down material in the previous session. And as I indicated, at the bottom of the slide just sort of like points out that it's very, very common for it to take more than one session for folks to kind of get the premise of behavioral activation and to become engaged with it. So do not be discouraged if a resident has not completed that first steps log in the first week. You're saying, all right, well, let's work on this now, and let's spend a little bit more time looking at why this can be so helpful. So you're going to be continuing to encourage them to point out how it's going to be helpful and to problem solve what's going to be needed for them to really do that work. And so here's that picture, the reminder of the ideal setting, with the understanding that you do not have control over the physical apartments and homes of the residences that you're working with. When at all possible, we're encouraging you to work at a table and chairs as opposed to a couch or easy chairs. It helps for writing. It helps, in that sitting at an angle to each other, helps for both you being able to turn to the resident, have face-to-face conversations, and also look at the same material together. So if it's at all possible, this is the setting that we're going to recommend. So here's the overview of what's happening in both sessions 4 and 5. We are introducing the concept that what happens in our lives on a daily basis matters, and especially what we do. So we're trying to encourage a sense of agency. We don't have control over a lot of areas of our life, but we do have some control over some facets of our daily life. And we're going to begin that conversation about activities that have been positive for them in the past. The hallmark of these 2 sessions are, as you look at the practice forms, that the do 2 and do 3 practice on that first steps is a bit of an activity monitoring on a daily basis of both some activities and their mood. So we're really trying to say that this is a very personalized approach, and it's a very specific, very detailed. We're gonna be scientists together and learn about your daily life. And we're going to encourage you at least once. You don't have to repeat it in both sessions, but in either session 4 or session 5, this would be a really good time to collect a new PHQ-9 score to see where things are at with their depression ratings. So this slide shows that outline to behavioral activation, which does include some time in mood monitoring, which is a part of sessions 4 and 5. And it's both to understand that there is a link between activities and mood, to begin to identify very specific activities in that individual's life that are linked to both more positive and more negative moods, to be looking for little minute changes from day to day, to look at what days are better than other days, and then to begin to schedule the activities that are linked to positive mood, and avoiding things that can be discontinued or avoided that are linked to negative moods for now, and to do some problem solving. So these are kind of like the 5 phases or the 5 steps involved in behavioral activation in your work with residents. So Do to Learn is the basic psychoeducational form that's provided in behavioral activation. So in sessions 4 and 5, you are both the resident is looking at their copy of Do to Learn in their packet, and you have a copy in front of you, and you are walking through the concept that all of our days are filled with a range of things, and there are things that we don't have control over, and then there are parts of our day that we do have control over. And there can be both positive and negative activities. You're starting this conversation as you're engaging in those 2 questions at the end. The resident in their packet is writing down some examples that you're talking about. And then Do 3 Learn is a continuation of that. And the important part of Do 3 Learn, as you're looking at and talking through this, is that there are really different types of positive activities. Some are just enjoyable, right? They're fun, they're pleasant. And we give some examples here. But then in addition to that, there are other positive activities that may not be in that category of fun or pleasant, but that are really important, that they're meaningful, that they're personally rewarding. And we want to pay attention to those as well. Certainly activities can be 1 or 2 types, and a number of them are linked to those values and strengths that the 2 of you discussed in sessions 1 and 2. So this might even be a time to flip back into that packet and to re-look at their values and strengths form, and to sort of say, how does this then link to the things that are meaningful and rewarding to you? And that as we're working together and working to reduce your depression, we're going to be looking to help on a daily basis. You have a combination of different types of positive activities in your day. So Do For Practice is a form that you will continue to work with the resident throughout the rest of the program. It's a working, living, breathing form that this is in sessions 4 and 5. You're introducing it, you're beginning to problem solve and put things down. And then throughout the program, you're providing new copies as they're refining and as they're beginning to come up with more ideas. And so you're starting to write down some things together in sessions 4 and then later in sessions 5. And then you're asking them to continue to be thinking about and to continue to add to the list between your time together. And then the rest of session 4 and 5 is devoted to introducing and then reviewing the first steps file. And so this Do For Learn introduces this idea that we really need to collect some very personal data. And this isn't something that you're going to be doing forever and forever. This is just over the next week or two. So this is, in the use of metaphors and analogy, this is similar to if someone has let's say a newly detected heart arrhythmia and the cardiologist provides them with a heart monitor that they need to wear at home for a period of time, a couple days or a week. The person isn't then going to be wearing that heart monitor for the rest of their lives. They're just doing it for a very short period of time to get some very concrete, very detailed data. Well, this is kind of like that, in that we're going to be having you work on the first steps between sessions 4 and 5, and likely between 5 and 6 for us to collect that data. And so Do 5 Learn walks through the details of how to use the Do to practice first steps. And there is another page that provides the specific instructions, and we're looking for any times in which there are shifts. And so here's that page that provides the detailed instructions that you're walking through. And then the important part for session 4, and then later on for session 5, as you have a new blank copy of this in front of you and the resident, is you're getting started. If you're meeting with them towards the end if you're in the afternoon period, day 1 could be the same day that you're meeting and say, well, let's get started. Let's jot down a couple of things that you did this morning. And what mood score would you give for this morning? Okay, so now, given the fact that we're mid-afternoon, let's go ahead and get the afternoon taken care of. What would you like to write down for your afternoon activities? And what mood would you put for right now? If you're meeting during the daytime, then day 1 that you would fill out would typically be the previous day. So let's say it's Tuesday and you're meeting with the resident at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning. Well, day 1, you would write down Monday and then, the month date in that little parentheses area, and you would talk through them and be coaching them through jotting down some of their observations from that previous day, from the day before when you're meeting. And then if you're towards the end of a Monday morning, let's say you're meeting at 11 o'clock, and say, well, let's go ahead and fill in today's date on day 2. Let's put down Tuesday and today's date, and let's go ahead and have you walk through your morning ratings. And so, what questions do you have? How doable does this feel? So what you're going to be doing between now and when we meet again is that you're going to be every time you're writing something down, is not meant to take more than a minute or 2. As we had this conversation, you wrote it down. How long do you think we spent? Yeah, it was really about 2 minutes that this took. So that's all we're asking you to do. This isn't really big and elaborate, but it is something that we'd like you to turn to and complete on a daily basis. So as we're starting to work with residents in behavioral activation, this slide is just a reminder of some of the basic tips and premises for behavioral activation. What we're doing is we're looking for the low-hanging fruit. We're looking for daily activities that are already positive, but that are less frequent. So it's great that they every morning make a cup of tea and fill out their crossword puzzle. And that's something that they do every day and they find it pretty enjoyable. That's great, but to reduce their current levels of depression, we're going to be looking for things that are more infrequent than that in the past were positive, or that when they do them now, they would be positive, but they're more infrequent than that. As clinicians, it's really easy for us to jump into wanting to help problem solve and repair things that are problematic, things that are linked to negative moods, whether it's negative activities or negative relationships, to problem solve and improve. But in the behavioral activation world, we're really just kind of leaving those alone. So we're not devoting much time and attention to trying to correct or problem solve negative relationships or other stressful life events. We're looking for things that when they exist, they're positive. And certainly, that conversation about past phases of their life and what's been positive in the past has been very important, and thinking like, okay, so how can we bring a piece of that into your day now? It may look different than the way it used to, but what would that look like now? So here's the reminder slide on session pacing, that all of this work is done with the understanding that we need time at the end of the session for wrap up. And it's common in work with older adults for this to feel rushed. And we need to be watching the clock and watching how much time we're devoting to each piece of this, so that we have enough time at the end of the session to be able to clarify questions, for them to have a crystal clear understanding of what's expected of them between now and the next time you're going to meet. You're going to be asking for feedback and saying, is there anything that I said today that just didn't feel good or felt off or didn't sit well with you? Now's a really good time for us to talk about that a little bit so that I can correct that. And then as you're then offering an encouraging statement, this isn't rah-rah phony cheerleader. This isn't overly bright that doesn't match the client's mood, but it is a gentle encouragement. That part of what happens with depression is it's easy to feel discouraged and hopeless. And so your role as a clinician is to point out the things that are encouraging, to point out the conversations and the information that the two of you gathered in today's session that are really going to help pave the way for the future, and that you see some very concrete signs that that there is a very strong possibility for this being helpful for their depression. And we provide some tips about this in the clinician guides on pages 82 and 83. For additional training on behavioral activation, we covered that in session 3 of the Culturally Responsive CBT video series that's now archived at the E4 Center. So on the slide, we provide the link to remind you of that as a resource should you be interested. We've got those 3 tip sheets from the Optimal Aging Center that summarize the basic 101 of things to keep in mind as you're working with older adults. And with that, that's our review for sessions 4 and 5. Again, you're repeating the exact same content in both sessions. And then I'm looking forward to our future discussions together and how this is going, and what questions come up as you're doing this work with Laguna Woods Village residents.